hand it over to Hise, though I do want to, Hise, I gotta read your bio, if you don't mind, because this is intense.
Okay.
Yeah, I normally don't just read things to people, but this is one of the most intense bios I've ever read, and I need everybody to be well aware of what's in here. Hise Gibson is a faculty member at the Harvard Business School. Most recently, he was an Academy Professor of Systems Engineering at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Dr. Hise O. Gibson graduated with a BS in Operations Research from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, and he received his MS in Operations Research from the Naval Postgraduate School, a Master's in Operations from the Air Command and Staff College, and a Doctor of Business Administration in Technology and Operations Management from Harvard Business School. He's a career military officer, if you couldn't tell, who attained the rank of colonel and is a master aviator. A master aviator in the UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, who's been awarded the Bronze Star Medal. He's led large and small teams globally, most recently as a battalion commander in the historic 82nd Airborne Division. He also was a fellow at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, engaged in strategic research initiatives with the DoD. And his expertise is the intersection of operational effectiveness and human capital development. And he has also worked with mid-size and large transportation and distribution organizations, retailers, finance, energy, and tech startups on operational issues and pathways to better leverage their human capital in more effective ways, maximizing the intersection of technology, people, and processes. Holy cow, Hise. Super impressive. I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us about building agile tech organizations. Super excited. Take it away.
That sounds way better. I don't know who you're talking about, but that guy is sounds okay.
Whoever you paid to write that, you good money well spent.
Well, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. And so, well, first off, thanks to GRIMMCon for inviting me to do this keynote. Really excited to engage this particular audience, and also look forward to sharing a handful of things that hopefully you can take away and leverage immediately following this discussion. But what I'd like to first take you to is a place back in 2004. And so in 2004, a younger me was a company commander in Afghanistan, in Iraq. We had just spent over a year in combat, flying over Baghdad, supporting a 39,000 person organization spread across Baghdad, and we thought we were going home. And so we were relaxing, sitting down, folding up our aircraft, getting ready to leave this place called Iraq in order to go home. But unfortunately, I got a call from my commander, my boss, who said, "Hey, the decision's been made that you and your team have to go back to combat. Have to go back to a place you've been flying over, primarily because over the previous 5 to 7 days while we were gone, other aircraft have been shot down. And the decision was made that we were the closest and were able to jump back in to the fight and support and help extend operations, not just in Baghdad, but further south." And so me as a young captain had to explain to my team, this group of gentlemen on the screen, that, hey, you're not going home to see your family. I need you to get ready in 48 hours to jump back on those iron horses and get back in the fight, because our nation needs us right now. So it had nothing to do with the technical expertise, because these were all professionals. These are all amazing pilots, amazing crew members, amazing maintainers, and amazing non-commissioned officers who could get the mission done. It had absolutely nothing to do with the technical competence that I had to focus on. I had to focus on, how do I influence, persuade, and inspire these individuals to jump back into the fire of a combat zone. This is very similar to what all of you have been engaging in not only the past 2 years, but over the arc of your careers. But more intensely, over the last 2 years, as we think about how has COVID impacted you and your teams, how has the shutdown reality exposed vulnerabilities in your processes, and it's not the technological expertise that you need to worry about. It's mainly the soft skills that are actually the hard skills. So I want to further describe this new normal that we're in and suggest how systems thinking, a different way of looking at these problems or challenges, flip it to more opportunities, and then also suggest ways to consider leading the remote teams in our new normal in which we are operating as a few key takeaways. So I think we all remember this kind of arc. 2019, everything's going great. If we're honest, very similar to the summer and what's happening, as we're in the middle of the pandemic. And then we all became very connected to this visual, the spikes, this reality of this thing called COVID-19. We've always been exposed to coronavirus, but this became a pretty nasty situation that, for the first time for all of us, completely shut down the markets and had us tumble really quickly. And we noticed that it didn't just hurt our partners and allies in Asia, but also on the continent, and actually shut the globe down. It's like a really bad sci-fi movie that we all have experienced. But as we come into 2021, we're starting to see vaccines, folks are getting shot, and we think we're good. Everything's fantastic. We're outside, we're engaging with each other, we're having parties, we're having gatherings, we're feeling good about ourselves. And then we've now all become very connected to this new variant, Omicron, that spreads faster. So now we almost have to take a lot of the lessons that we've learned and reimagine and reinvent how we're going to operate with something that spreads even faster, but we don't want to shut down. And it completely changes our ideas of what normal is. This term new normal has been thrown around a lot over the past couple of years, but I would argue that it's really not a new normal. It's just become our normal. And we have to think about how are we going to operate. And as we think about organizations that immediately went to 100% remote, some have stated they're going to remain remote, some try to bring people back. These are all the challenges in which we have to deal with right now. Because this has become our normal. With us engaging in this way, the world has now become even flatter on the screens with little squares, and now we're trying to be as productive as humanly possible. And even in that environment, we have a whole lot of folks who wish we could go all the way back to 2019. We get back to 2019, back to the future, we would be ecstatic. But we recognize now that maybe this open office cubicle farm concept is not going to come back anytime soon. So we're going to have to think about the hybrid model. How are we going to be able to go in and out of this reality effectively as leaders? Because again, similar to a combat zone, it's not the technical competence that's the challenge, it's our ability to inspire, persuade others to want to engage. Because some of us can be in the office, some of us can be in this flat world, but at least from the organization that I spent most of my adult life in, the training never stops. We don't have that luxury. Because we live in this VUCA environment. And VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so if we think about being in this kind of environment that we're in, it's very dynamic. There's things going on, it's not linear. And we need leaders and teammates who are comfortable being uncomfortable and are able to consistently sustain the ability to operate in this kind of environment. because the world in which we live in has a lot of kind of wicked problems. The challenge is that sometimes our way at approaching these problems, there's sometimes a mismatch between what we think is going to work and what actually is going to work. So I'd like to suggest to you maybe to take a systems thinking approach to this VUCA world, and maybe change your mental model and how you think about approaching the challenges that have become ever present in your reality. And so if we think about this VUCA world, this vulnerable, uncertain, complex, and bigger environment, there's the real world reality, but a systems approach, a way to think about a systems approach is maybe thinking about what are the distinctions in the reality that we're operating, what are the systems that we have, what are the relationships and the perspectives. This is a systems thinking framework. There are many. This is one, and this is taken from my colleague at Cornell, Derek Cabrera at the Cabrera Lab, where he's done extensive research on the DSRP method. Because we have the real world that has real boundaries, we throw things together, we create a bunch of systems, but sometimes you may forget the interconnectedness of these systems and they're in a massively complex way in which we operate. And the DSRP allows us to quickly go in, figure out what those distinctions are, recognize that every large system can be broken down into smaller groups because it's easier to eat an elephant one bite at a time. We can then distinguish those relationships and recognize every component, every person, every division has a perspective, and you start to understand how to put yourself in other shoes in order to attack and smooth out challenges and problems. Because this is the world that we're living in. It's challenging, there's cyber threats, we're trying to protect data, and so we have the real world, but when we have our real world systems, you can approximate how it's going to be. You have some mental model, the world informs you, and you're in a constant loop, which means that you have the real world, you approximate, you leverage DSRP to inform how you're going to react to the world as it is, not the world you wish it to be. Because the reality is the training must continue, or in this case, the way in which you operate must continue, because as we sit here, your organizations are being probed, you have folks trying to get at the data that we have. I mean, although technology integration has massively made our lives easier, it's for every new technological intervention, there's 5, 6, hundreds of different branches and sequels of challenges that we have to engage in. And so, because training doesn't need to stop, we have to think about how are we going to lead these remote teams. Now, this is something we've all become very connected to over the past 2 years. If we think about, most organizations had less than 20% of its population working in some kind of remote status. And now, even post-pandemic, that has gone up to about 70%. And so when operating in remote environments, I would suggest that there are teams and there are leaders. And the scale is weighted towards the leader. And so something that the leaders can do is think about quickly using a lead framework. How do we leverage the particular platform? There are many platforms, GoToMeeting, Zoom, MS Teams, but what is the platform you're going to focus on and ensure that all of your teams are able to leverage in a meaningful way? And then how are you going to lean in as a leader? Leaning in means lean into the friction of what's really going on. How do you really measure productivity? How do you ensure your teammates are doing okay? What's going on behind the screen? It requires a frequency of interactions to kind of get through the friction. And so leaders have to engage. And by engaging, you're able to adapt to the environment. And the seesaw effect of we're going to all be fully remote. We're going to come in 2 to 3 days a week. We're going to come in 1 day a week. We're going to have this kind of cadence. So if you think about the way in which you're adapting, are you adapting in a way that's almost like whiplash to your teammates? Or are you providing a level of predictability that enhances productivity over time? And then fundamental for all leaders to be effective is the ability to distill quickly information and provide the important points in order to allow your teams to operate effectively. Because no matter how much technology exists, no matter how VUCA the world is, when looking at surveys around what makes effective or ineffective organizations, what makes effective or ineffective leaders, it all comes back to how does the leader communicate? And the way in which the leader communicates, how does that leader make the team feel? And is it a psychologically safe environment where everyone feels they can speak up, are heard, is inclusive, and valued? And all of that is on the backs of leaders, no matter what industry we're operating in. And so remote work requires far more managerial engagement and active engagement than when we're just in the office. And I think that's something that we've all learned over the past 2 years, and I would argue must be remembered as we move through a sustained reality of our current environment and as we push through into the future, because now we are going to have a segment of the workforce that really is very comfortable operating remote, very comfortable operating in this virtual world. And we have leaders who have to adapt to being far more engaging than prior to 2020. And so I would suggest that as we think about building agile tech organizations, it really just comes back to some fundamentals. I suggest thinking about how do you leverage a systems thinking approach. Not very complex, just recognizing the world that you're in, thinking through the mental model that you have, the framework that you leverage in order to be effective, and then maybe think about leveraging lead. Ensure that the platform that you're utilizing virtually and non-virtually or hybrid is the one that you need. Leaning into the friction and not running away from it. When you lean in, your teams feel it. When you run away, your teams feel it. And the reality is, people don't leave organizations. People leave people. And think about how adaptive are you to the environment that you're in? Do you feel comfortable in it? Are you able to pivot when necessary? I mean, those are some really self-reflections required to really think about how adaptive you are. And how well do you distill large volumes of information and pull out the important points and then share that with your team? Again, communication is the key to any organization to be effective, for any organization to scale. And in order to have an agile tech organization, it's not necessarily the leader. Who is the person on the keyboard? Who's the person in the SOC who is, when the breach happens, is right there at the keyboard, able to make a decision to influence the reputational risk of the firm? It's going to be based on the information that that person has at the time, that the leaders have at the time, and how much practice the team has had across. So again, communication is imperative. I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention. I really look forward to any of your questions.